Hi there. Thanks for joining me here on Conversations for Yoga Teachers. I'm your host, Karen Fabian, the founder of Bare Bones Yoga and the creator of the Momentum Magic Method, the way to become a confident teacher, one who effortlessly walks around the room, shares clear cues, easily builds sequences, and speaks from your heart, sharing authentically with your students. Here on the podcast, you'll discover new and inspiring ways to share your cues and create your sequences. You'll uncover habits and frameworks all designed to empower you so that you can teach in a way that feels authentic and natural. For some episodes, I'll have a guest, and other episodes I'll share with you on my own, and in each one, you'll always get action steps and takeaways you can apply right away to your teaching. In addition to the podcast, follow me on Instagram and TikTok for daily videos. You'll see a link on both of my profiles, my Stan Store link. Click it and unlock ways you can get the support you need to be the teacher of your dreams. You'll find links to the podcast, my free ebook, and other resources to help you be the best teacher you can be. You'll also find the link to my signature program, the Yoga Anatomy Blueprint Learning Program, and you can see if you qualify to enroll. So with that, let's get on with today's show. Hi there. Welcome to Conversations for Yoga Teachers. I'm your host, Karen Fabian, and this is episode 374. I'm recording this on October 16th, 2025, and this will go live on October 20th. So how is your fall going? It's definitely fall here in Boston, and over the past couple of days, it has gotten a little bit colder. But if you listened to last week's episode, I think I mentioned that I was going to be running my first road race in many, many, many years after many years of running lots of races, like more 5 and 10Ks that I could remember, 2 marathons, a half marathon. I probably haven't run a race in over 10 years, although I have been running, but I don't know, I just, for whatever reason, just fell out of the pattern of picking a race, usually a couple a year, training for it and that sort of thing. But I did mention in my last episode that I signed up in the summer for a fall road race, which is the 10K for women, the Boston 10K for women. It's about 6,000 women. It has a whole group of elite racers in the beginning. And I had signed up for it in the summer, but as it was getting closer, it was last weekend, I was getting really nervous. And I'm happy to say that I finished. I did not run fast. I think I ran like 11-minute miles, which considering I used to run 8-minute miles is crazy. But it wasn't about the time. For me, it was just about finishing and doing it. And it was such a fun experience to be back in that racing mode again, even though I used the term racing kind of loosely. But it was definitely something that I took seriously in terms of training and in terms of the race itself. Everybody heads into road races with a different perspective. And I know when I run a road race, I'm very focused. I definitely take it seriously. And around me, a lot of times, there are people that are running with a friend, they're having conversation, they're pushing their kid in a stroller, they're walking. All of that is great. That's why I love the community that's part of road racing. But I personally take it super serious. And so I ran with my headphones. I listened to the entire brand new Taylor Swift Life of a Showgirl album, which was like 42 minutes. So that took me through most of the race. Matter of fact, I can remember because I know the course well. I actually ran this race many years ago when the album was done. So that was I knew in my head, oh, I'm about 42 minutes in. And then I had a little bit more. I had to go over the Mass Ave Bridge. Sorry about that. I'm actually not going to edit that out, such as life. Um, I had to go over the Mass Ave Bridge, if you know Boston, and then make a left on Com Ave. And I picked just a couple of other songs. In retrospect, that kind of messed things up because I had to be messing around with my phone to pick a different song. I didn't have a song list that was long enough. But I will say it was great when I came around the final turn. all of a sudden my hamstring just completely seized up, I think on my left leg. And I completely freaked out because I thought, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to finish this race. But it came, I just kind of like put my hand on the back of my leg and rubbed it a little bit and it went away. And I finished and it was great. And I will say, one of the things from kind of an equipment perspective that was a bummer was I was carrying my phone, and I really don't like that, but I couldn't find anything last minute that was a good way to hold my phone. So I realized as soon as I was done, I was gripping my phone so hard that my entire body was like gripping. And that was that was just like the muscles released when I was done, and I felt like I was going to be sore. I was pretty wiped out for the rest of the day and for the next day, but after that I felt great. So I'm really glad I finished. It was a great experience, and I'm just really proud of myself. So for today, what I want to go over with you is, my Instagram reels, on my TikTok as well, but especially on my Instagram, they really have just picked up steam, and I'm doing this format where I break down a yoga pose into its components, anatomy, cueing, and just getting a lot of traction. I'm starting to get more consistent commenting from yoga teachers. And one of the things I put out there was a request for people to say, hey, these are cues I want to understand a little bit better. And I got a couple of submissions. So I actually did an Instagram live video today and I saved it to my page. And I thought this would also make for a really good podcast. So when you listen to this episode, if you want to also see it in kind of workshop format, just go to my Instagram and you can watch it. What I'll actually do, and I'll just make a note here, I'll include the IG live link in the show notes. So you can just go to the show notes for this episode and watch it from there. But I think, sometimes we consume content in different ways, and you might be going for a walk or driving and you can listen to the content. And then when you watch it, you'll get the skeleton, you'll get my demoing, and that'll pull it all together. So I want to start out by saying, this whole conversation or any conversation about cueing, it really needs to be put in context, because I know a lot of times yoga teachers think there's a right way to cue and a wrong way to cue, or this pose should have these cues and these cues and that pose would be incorrect. But you really need context. And it's really hard to say, oh, this pose only works in these, or this cue only works in these poses. I mean, you really need the full picture. So whenever you're taking a class, if a teacher uses a cue that you don't understand, I would just encourage you to ask that person after class, can you tell me a little bit about that cue? And just let me know, like, I don't really get the reason for that. And I know that that sort of thing doesn't normally happen, if ever. I have actually had students come up to me and ask me questions about cueing, and I love getting into those conversations. So I would just encourage you, because that gives you a chance to go right to the source of the person who said the cue, and to learn a little bit more about that person's rationale for using it. Now, having said that, when you're going out and teaching your classes, I would definitely emphasize the importance of you only sharing cues that you truly can explain, because that's going to make you feel so much more confident when you're teaching, and you're going to then be able to answer any questions that come up. But even if questions don't come up, when you're sharing that cue, it's going to come across so much more clearly and confidently, because you can back it up. And that's a completely different experience than when you're just sort of saying things. Now, I go into that particular aspect a lot more in the intro of the IG Live video, so I'm not going to sort of go into that as much here. I want to sort of hop right to the cues, and then you can get the full picture when you watch the video. So one of the things that was a little difficult for me was when the teachers commented on my video with cue examples, they didn't include the pose that the cue is used in. And I talked about this a lot in the IG Live. It's really hard for me to get a cue from you without the posture, because that's the other part of the picture. One particular cue in isolation can apply to a lot of different poses. So I had to sort of make some assumptions when I was going through this kind of deciphering, but I did my best, and you'll catch that here and on the video. So the first cue that someone submitted was the cue to lengthen your spine. And there's a couple of different scenarios where lengthen your spine applies. And I think one of the most common ones is anything where we have the body in an upright position. So when you're taking people through mountain pose or warrior one or tree, these are examples that come to mind where the spine is in a lengthened position. But keep in mind, the spine at length is not totally straight like a pole. It has its natural curve. So it's got the inward curve of the cervical, the outward curve of the thoracic, the inward curve of the lumbar. And so just keep that in mind. All of the cueing to a flat back is another thing that falls into this bucket. So we just want to keep in mind when we understand the literal anatomy of the spine, we know that asking people to come to a flat back is more of an artistic expression. The back is not really flat. And when you are teaching a pose where you have somebody standing up straight, or like warrior one, or even downward dog, which is an inversion, of course, but they're pressing away from the floor to create length in their spine. What is happening there muscularly is the erector spinae are working to lengthen the spine, but the spine is staying in this somewhat straight position. Even though the erector spinae can also take the spine into a back bend, which is spinal extension. So the difference there is really just how much range of motion are you leveraging from these muscles that create spinal length. So spinal length at neutral is standing up straight. Spinal extension is a back bend, but it's the same muscle. It's the erector spinae. So keep that in mind. And this is also the other component of sharing a cue that you understand. When you not only can say the cue, but you can share the joint movement that the cue is speaking to, as well as the muscle that creates that joint movement, that's when you really demonstrate you know what you're talking about. You can reverse engineer from what you're saying all the way back to the anatomy that backs it up. So that was the first example. The next example I got, and this was an interesting one, was tuck your pubic bone and lift your tailbone towards your spine. So it took me a couple of go-arounds, and you'll see this on the video, to decipher this. But let's first get our landmark straight. So pubic bone is right in front, below your belly button, a couple of inches below your belly button, right in front. And when you press on it, if you press on it right now with your index finger, it's a soft spot that sits right below the belly button that, when you look on the skeleton, is the connection between the two pelvic bones. It's not really bone, it's more cartilage, which is why it feels kind of soft. So that's the pubic bone. Now, the tailbone is the coccyx, and that's below the sacrum, and that's on the back of the body. Like if you were to fall on the ice and break your tailbone, that thing. So if you're asking somebody to tuck your pubic bone and lift your tailbone towards your spine, you could make the case that you're asking them to come into an anterior pelvic tilt. So if you take your hands on your hips in standing or in sitting, when you're sitting up straight, and you push your belly button down to face the floor. If your belly button had a light coming out of it, the light would shine on the ground. You're taking the top edge of your pelvis and you're dumping it forward. That goes along with tucking your pubic bone and lifting your tailbone towards your spine. Now, that's the movement, anterior pelvic tilt, that her cue that she submitted to me describes. But now you have to say, well, when would you want to use that cue? So the example I gave in the video was chair pose. When you have people come into chair, you're taking them into an anterior pelvic tilt. And actually, when you have people come into dancer's pose, I didn't mention this on the video, but dancer's pose has an anterior pelvic tilt as well. But you're not typically cueing to that. When you're teaching chair, you're typically saying something like, bring your feet together, drop your hips, bend your knees, drop your hips. You might say something like, drop your sitting bones towards your back heel, drop your tailbone towards your heels. So with those cues to the tailbone, you're getting that anterior pelvic tilt, which is sort of baked into the alignment of the pose. You're not necessarily saying to people, oh, hey, can you tuck your pubic bone and lift your tailbone towards your spine? And if you lift the tailbone toward the spine too much, you're going to cave in your lower back, which is called a sway back. And you don't want to necessarily create that excessive curve in the lumbar spine. So again, without the pose that she's referring to, I'm not exactly sure how this cue would be used, but in my mind, that's what that cue speaks to, an anterior pelvic tilt. The next one I got as an example was zipping the inseam. And zipping is an interesting word because, of course, it refers to a zipper, which is basically a zipper's function is to join two sides of fabric together. And when you zip up, you create that connection, that joining. And in the body, you could make the case for zipping up, kind of like zipping up the core, zipping up the midline of the body, zipping up the inner line of the thigh. And it's sort of an artistic description of, you could make the case for muscular action. So let's say you had people in tree and you asked them to zip up the midline of the body, zip up the inseam of the body. I mean, inseam there would be a little inappropriate, but zip up the midline could work, which basically speaks to the rectus abdominis, which runs from the pubic bone up to the sternum. The other example, let's say you're referring to the inner line of the back thigh in Warrior One or Warrior Two. You could make the case to zip up the inseam of the inner thigh from the back heel up to the pelvis. And that just refers to sort of creating more knee extension, activation of the quads, zipping up that fascial line that runs from the back heel all the way up to the inner groin. So this is I think, a really good example of a cue that's super cool sounding and quite artistic, but doesn't really communicate clearly with your students. And I always come at things from the point of view of, if you're going to use an artistic cue, you really need to share the literal cue so people know what you're talking about. And at the end of the day, always err on the side of just speaking plainly so that people don't have to spend a lot of time trying to interpret what you're saying. The next example I got was draw your shoulders down and away from your ears. And I feel like this one's sort of out there a lot, and you may actually even be saying this in your classes. Now, you're definitely going to want to watch the video for this because I use the skeleton to describe shoulder anatomy here. And obviously, this cue is speaking to shoulders, right? Draw your shoulders down and away from your ears. So you could sort of view this in two different ways. You could view this as you're asking people to drop their scapula, which is scapular depression. So maybe you have people in Warrior One and you feel like their scapula are elevated too much. So you ask them to draw the shoulders down and away from your ears. So when you hear ears, that's a sign that they're really talking to the scapula, not so much the shoulders. But you could make a case, if the scapula are elevated, the shoulders are up as well. So yeah, maybe you would say drop the shoulder blades. But I want you to keep in mind that in poses where the arms are up, shoulder flexion, like down dog, Warrior One, tree, when the arms are up, when the shoulders are in flexion, the scapula upwardly rotate. And when the scapula upwardly rotate, if you ask people to then drop the shoulders or drop the shoulder blades, you're interfering with that natural movement. So that's why when the shoulders are in flexion, you really don't want to ask people to drop the shoulder blades unless their scapula are so elevated that you have to speak to it. So maybe say something like, relax your shoulder blades a little bit versus drop, which will disconnect that congruence that's there from that rhythm between the humeral head and the scapula. But the other aspect to this could be talking to external rotation of the shoulders. So if you ask people to draw your shoulders down and away from your ears, you could also make the case that you're asking them to externally rotate the shoulders a little bit, or even just use the joint connection, the joint shape, which can roll, right? Draw your shoulders down and away from your ears. So you're sort of asking, almost like you're stirring a pot. You're asking people to roll, draw the shoulders down, which you could make the case as creating a little bit of external rotation. The bottom line is this cue, I mean, in my 20 plus years of teaching, I've definitely heard this cue a lot, and you really need the context. Like, I would love to ask teachers that use this cue, why are you using this cue? In what scenario are you using it? Are you using it because it's just the thing you say in pose X? Are you using it because you see something in class in a particular student and you're inspired to share it because what you saw was X and you'd rather see Y? Like, this is really the difference between I'm using a cue and I know what I'm talking about, or I'm using a cue because this is what I was trained to say, or this is what I heard, or this is what I believe based on my limited understanding of anatomy. So if you've got some background on this that you want to share, just send me a DM and I can do some follow up on the next episode regarding this cue. And then the last one is another teacher submitted a question. Hey, what about eye of the elbows facing each other in plank, low plank, and tabletop? And what this really speaks to is the external rotation of the shoulders. Because when you look at plank, low plank, and tabletop, they all have shoulders and external rotation, even though you might not know that. But let's think about it. And again, watch the video for more detail. In all of those poses, the shoulders are in flexion. As the arm goes out in front, in plank, low plank, tabletop, that's shoulder flexion. But there's also external rotation in that pose. You don't want people to be hunching in any of those postures. You could put down dog in that category as well. So you need to create a little external rotation to facilitate or prevent that rolling in. And so when people have their palms down, which is pronation, it's hard to say, hey, open your shoulders because the palms face down. So if you speak to the elbows and say, roll the inner eyes of the elbows forward, then what you're essentially saying is, hey, uh, externally rotate your shoulders, because as you speak to their elbows, the shoulder externally rotates. As you roll the inner eye of the elbow forward or up, or roll the biceps to the outer walls, these are all different ways people cue this. If you go up the kinetic chain to the shoulder, that's what's happening. Shoulder is externally rotating. So that's the genesis of that cue in my mind. In those postures, you want to create a little external rotation. It's hard to get people to do that movement if you literally speak to their shoulders because their palms are down. So speak to their elbows. Ask them to externally rotate from the, or I'm sorry, ask them to roll the inner eyes of the elbows forward, and that will create that external rotation. So as you're listening to this, if you have questions, definitely send me a DM. I also want to give a huge shout out to the group of teachers who just enrolled in my Yoga Anatomy Accelerator program in the month of October. I've had 6 people enroll over the past 2 weeks. And, it's just so exciting because not just to have these teachers step up and say, hey, I am ready to learn more anatomy, and this is the result I hope to get from enrolling in your program. But all of these teachers enrolled in my program because they saw my videos on Instagram. And that was really the spark that lit the flame. We got into the DMs. They shared a little bit about what they were hoping to learn, and then they enrolled from there. So, if you haven't checked out these videos, it might be, and you know that you're teaching and you lack this understanding of anatomy, or maybe you're teaching and you really want to be able to feel more confident. And maybe you want to be able to share the anatomy behind the cues, answer your student questions with more clarity and conviction, and really be able to help your students. Then take a look at those videos. And if you have been watching them and it's been sort of, inspiring you to take that next step forward, and you're on the fence, send me a DM and say, hey, Karen, I'm listening to your podcast. I've been watching your videos, and I really want to know if this Yoga Anatomy Accelerator program could help me. And I'm happy to have a conversation with you. Like I said, all these teachers, that's how they enrolled. They saw the videos, we got into some conversation, and that was it. Now, because you're listening on the podcast, if you tell me that that is how you're reaching out to me from listening to this episode, I'll also offer you a special podcast discount. So don't forget to mention that when you reach out to me on Instagram. The last thing I'll say with regard to this accelerator program, yoga teachers, I think this is just human nature. They get, kind of concerned and hung up on like, well, when do the live sessions happen? And I live in a different time zone than you. And how am I going to consume the content? And is it self-guided? And all of these details. I want you to think, number one, what's the result you want if you were to enroll in my program? And I'm going to make sure you get that result to the best of my ability and as much as you participate. So that's the main thing. All the other stuff, when it's happening, when the live sessions are, can I watch the replays, lifetime access or not, all that stuff is secondary. I want you to think the reason you have for enrolling in this program, you're going to tell me what that is, and I'm going to help you get that result. So that's number one. Number two, I have people all over the world. The most recent person who enrolled, I live in Boston, she lives in Dubai. So anybody in the world can enroll in this program and it will work for them. And the reason, from like a scheduling perspective, it works for anybody is, number one, you can watch the replays. Number two, you get a bonus one-on-one call with me, which of course we set up when it works for your schedule. And number three, when I enroll groups, I poll them to see a common time and hopefully find a common time that works for everybody. But if it doesn't, you can watch the replay. And then number four, not only do you get lifetime access to all the replays, you can come to any future session at no extra cost. So even though I run this program every single month, like these people who enrolled in October, when I do the November group, they can come to the November group's live trainings. You don't have to re-enroll or pay more money. You always can come to the live trainings anytime you want. So you're actually getting multiple iterations of this program with only investing one time. And the last thing I'll say is, because I know this is something else you're probably thinking, which is, oh, I'll just wait till next month. You don't have to wait until the first of the month to start. You can enroll anytime in the month. You'll just simply start with whatever training we're at. And then when the beginning of the month comes, you'll roll into the next one. And truth be told, if I don't get a lot of people enrolling in a particular month, sometimes I take those folks, and when I have more people in the next month, I'll put them together. So this October group has one person who enrolled in late September, and then the rest of these folks enrolled in October. So I do not want you to get hung up on the semantics, the timing, the scheduling. I want you to think, and this is different thinking, because all the yoga programs out there, they don't run like my programs. They run like hours and schedule, and all of that's like super emphasized. I am like a custom shop. I have the bandwidth right now to give people custom attention, and that's what I do. So I'm all about, what do you want to learn? What kind of teacher do you want to be? You tell me that, I'm going to help you get there. And you don't have to get hung up on any of the details. And of course, I'll share with you the details. And I'm sure you're going to be able to take advantage of some of those. But ultimately, I'm going to help you get where you want to go. You just got to tell me what that's about, what that looks like. Okay, so link, I'll include that in the show notes. And any questions, send me a DM on Instagram. And I look forward to hearing from you. I'll talk to you on the next episode. Namaste. Thanks for being here with me today. I hope you enjoyed the episode. And hey, one more thing. While I don't know you personally, I know what a yoga teacher looks like who's ready to have a breakthrough to being the kind of yoga teacher who walks around the room, sharing cues you know the reason for, understands anatomy, teaching signature sequences without notes or any need to practice with class, and loves teaching yoga without stress, anxiety, or nervousness. If you are ready to be that yoga teacher, here is your next step. DM me the words podcast offer, and I will give you a special incentive to work with me inside of my signature program just because you are listening to the podcast. DM me on Instagram at Bare Bones Yoga. I can't wait to hear from you.